everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Safe Space. This is episode 13. We've made 13 episodes. Congratulations, Brittany. We survived.
Congratulations to you.
Before we get started, let me go ahead and read our disclaimer. This presentation is intended to serve as legal information and does not replace legal advice. Contact Lone Star Legal Aid at 1-800-733-8394 or go to www.lonestarlegal.org for more information on legal assistance. I know I actually forgot to introduce myself. I was excited. Hi, my name is Brandy Lowry. I'm a staff attorney for the Individual Safety Unit for Lone Star Legal Aid.
Brittany. And I'm Brittany Hightower. I'm also a staff attorney with the Individual Safety Unit here at Lone Star Legal Aid.
So today's episode, this is actually a very good episode, especially in the climate that we're in. It is sexual violence and the Fair Housing Act. And we have two great, wonderful experts in this field to help us discuss this topic. Kelly, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Hello, my name is Kelly Howard. I'm a staff attorney with Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid in Austin, and I'm on the housing law team.
Thank you for joining us. And Giovanni, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Giovanni Zamora. I am the Fair Housing Testing Coordinator for the Austin Tenants Council, and I wear many hats there. Predominantly, I advocate for tenants and educate them according to their rights for the Fair Housing Act and tenant landlord. And then I also recruit and train volunteers for the Fair Housing Program, testing program.
Well, thank you again for being here with us. Brittany, let's get started.
All right. So first, what are we talking about when we refer to fair housing laws? Kelly, I'm going to direct that at you since you're the lawyer here with us today.
Well, there are state and federal fair housing laws. There's the Fair Housing Act. There's a federal one and a state one that are basically the same. They have 7 protected classes. And today I think we're focusing on the class of sex discrimination. Then there's also some other disability rights laws that apply to housing. And finally, there are local housing laws that would probably be called an ordinance. Like for example, the city of Austin has its own fair housing ordinance, and they have added some protected classes to the 7 classes that are in the state and federal Fair Housing Acts.
So in regards to those laws and acts, for those that are probably unaware, how would the order rank? Like, would they start with the federal laws first to enforce, or would they start with the local or state?
So if you think you've been discriminated against because you're a member of a protected class that's only covered by the local ordinance, then you got to start there. Otherwise, you can go with any law that applies to you and your landlord in your situation.
Okay. Do all landlords have to follow fair housing laws? And
that's a good.
Go ahead.
Were you asking me?
Yes, I was like, go ahead.
Well, that is a good question because there are some limits. If a landlord, but it is limited. Under the state and federal acts, if a landlord owns fewer than 4 rental properties and they don't use a realtor and they're not advertising, then they're not covered by the law. But that's a very limited situation. So I think Giovanni would agree with me that we would want at our agencies for people to reach out to us and we can help you figure it out rather than assume that it doesn't apply to you.
Yes.
Giovanni, can you give us some examples you've seen where maybe a landlord wouldn't qualify, or what maybe looks like a typical example where the law does apply to a landlord?
Certainly. There are several exemptions, where it would not apply for the owner-occupied buildings. If it's like a religious establishment, and they limit their occupancy to the members, or any organization that is like a private club that is strictly limited to those members. However, if those with those exemptions, if they advertise in a discriminatory way, then they will lose their exemption
Mhm.
and they will be covered under the Fair Housing Act.
Okay.
So basically, like if somebody's in a small apartment complex, or if they're renting a house from somebody who owns the house, that's going to be covered, right?
Yes, well, if they are renting a house, if that owner owns more than that property, more than let's say 4 properties, or if that owner is living there, if that owner, even if he doesn't own like many houses, but if he used a real estate broker, then yes, that's covered under the Fair Housing Act.
Okay. So who is protected by fair housing? And either one of y'all can take this question.
I can. Really, anyone who is trying to rent housing is protected, or buy housing. So it's, you could be a tenant right now or homeowner right now, or you could be trying to become one. And if you're denied either the opportunity to qualify to rent or buy the house or to live there, or you're trying to live there and it's, for example, not accessible to you when it should be based on your disabilities, all through the whole encounter with the landlord, you're qualified for protection under the act if the act is violated. And I'll add, including if you're trying to leave. You know, some clients that we have want to end their lease early because they have a disability and they need to end it early because the housing's no longer accessible. And trying to stop becoming somebody's tenant is another way that you're covered under the act.
So it sounds like there's a lot of broad protections under, or a broad groups of people who could be protected under these fair housing laws. But specifically in regards to sexual violence, what kind of action or behavior from the landlord or from whoever's involved in the person becoming a homeowner, what kind of actions are they protected from?
Go ahead, Giovanni. I'm sure Giovanni has some terrible stories that she could share if she wanted to.
We like hearing more stories, so go ahead.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's there's so many that we hear nowadays. Now we haven't really, I will say, like for this year we haven't had that many, but for the sexual violence portion of it, but we do see many landlords who are discriminating against females or males in regards to their rental housing. And it's especially horrible with the people that are in affordable housing right now, because, you know, it's hard enough with the, you know, dealing with this pandemic and trying to stay afloat, but then they are being threatened by landlords telling them that they, you know, well, if in order for you to stay here, you're going to have to provide some type of sexual act, or they'll be involved in some kind of coercion. And it's just mind blowing that we see that. I actually have 2 right now. One was who is a transgender, and he was threatened by a landlord with not getting his repairs done. And then I have an actual domestic violence victim right now who the landlord is taking sides with the abuser, rented to him, and then did not have any communications or tried to reach out to the actual victim when she was asking for help. You know, change the doors on my lots, you know, help me get out of this, recognize this, don't like re-rent one. So we see a lot of horror stories like that, and it's really sad because we're limited in what we can do, and we have to just follow the protocol as far as like filing it with HUD and just giving the abuser confidence, knowing that they're not alone, and get them to the proper resources that can help them while they're going through this problem.
So I do want to go a little bit deeper into the process and the protocols. So if the landlord, for instance, in that instance, was siding with the abuser, what do they need to do? Do they contact you all first and then y'all help with the application? Like, how does that work?
Well, it's we hope that they try to contact us first so
Mhm.
that we can get them educated and tell them what they should do and how we can help them with filing a complaint to HUD. But we also, of course, want them to, make sure that they contacted the civil authorities. And if need be, they may need to contact an attorney. Safe Place is usually the only place that we are comfortable with sending people to or
Mhm.
referring them to, because they are able to answer their questions. But when they are feeling that, our main problem is getting them to contact us. A lot of these victims are sad and they're scared, they're afraid. They fear retaliation if they say anything. They don't know what to do, and that prevents them from contacting our agency and getting help that they need, whether it's directly from us or whether it's from one of our sister partnering agencies.
And this is probably for Kelly. So if they can't contact, well, okay, so that's for instances when HUD is involved, like the affordable housing, correct? So what about like the private landlords that will like harass the tenants or try to discriminate against the sexual violence? Like who can they contact, or what is the process for them to go through if it's not like, it's not a HUD housing?
I think the process would be the same because any landlord like we talked about who is covered by the state or federal Fair Housing Acts, then they cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. And two forms of that discrimination could be quid pro quo sexual harassment or a hostile environment of sexual harassment. And we may have heard those terms in any trainings you've done in your job about workplace sexual harassment. And it's the same idea that a landlord can't try to trade sexual acts for rent, for example, or repairs. That would be quid pro quo. And then the landlord can't just generally create a hostile environment of making inappropriate comments or trying or actually touching someone, just as another example. So any landlord who's covered by the state or federal Fair Housing Act, if they do that, that would be sex discrimination. And like Giovanni said, I think it's also sometimes a crime. And then that's where the safety planning comes in, where you would want to contact your local shelter, law enforcement, et cetera.
So how are these laws enforced? I mean, is it something where you just go down to the courthouse and you file a petition like you would in certain kinds of landlord-tenant disputes, or do you have to go through the police to file a report to begin? What are your avenues for having these laws enforced?
I know just generally speaking, outside of what Giovanni can speak to, which is the HUD complaint process, you can certainly, it may become a defense to eviction. For example, if a landlord tries to evict a tenant for non-payment, the tenant's defense may be, well, I tried to pay you in actual money and you wanted something else, which was quid pro quo sexual harassment, and that fair housing violation is an affirmative defense to eviction, just as one example. You could sue the landlord, certainly, I think, for violating the Fair Housing Act, but the HUD complaint process is something you can do without using the courts, without using a lawyer, and it can be a lot faster than a lawsuit sometimes. But Giovanni, do you want to talk about that?
Yes, what we do is what we hope and pray that someone, an abuser or victim of like domestic violence or sexual harassment, they will get in touch with us, and we have been trained to help them with the process to make the fair housing discrimination complaint to HUD. We handle all of the paperwork for them. It's free of charge. And then we guide them through the entire process of the complaint with HUD. It can be right now, due to the pandemic, unfortunately, it can be some time before they actually get assigned an investigator. But that investigator is going to be assigned to the case probably within 30 days. And they will then contact both of us, the person, the abuser, and me, the advocate, or whoever's working with the person who reported it. We even work with caregivers who, because the victim might be too scared to do it, make the report on their own. And so we do work with the community. Now, eventually this victim or the would eventually have to speak up, but we can definitely, if they have the power of attorney, we can definitely speak to their caregivers through the process as well. The main thing is we just want them to contact us so that they're not doing this alone, and that we can help them with the process and filing the complaint to HUD. And then HUD will then proceed with doing their investigation on the property and getting all of the factual statements from the victim.
What are some of the possible outcomes of a HUD investigation of the formal complaint process?
They vary. I mean, they could, what we hope, of course, is that, that the investigator will find something and then they will have the property cease the activity. Sometimes there's financial compensation involved and form of conciliation to the victim, whether it's because they might have had to move, or just unnecessary expenses that would occur due to the sexual harassment or involvement, domestic violence that they had. We also can request that they get trained. Each situation is going to, the person that committed the fault has to be trained. We could request that, but each situation is going to be different. There's no really way of knowing exactly which way the investigator is going to swing. But we do make sure that the clients are aware of that as well, and know that they do have other options to outside of filing the discrimination complaint.
So if a person who is being sexually harassed is scared to come to y'all, for assistance or whatever, can somebody report the landlord on their behalf?
Yes, they can. And we can address it, like we can do a complaint, I guess, under ATC, Austin Tenants Council, for that particular property, because of that, or again, whomever is reporting for that person, eventually, if they can convince that person to speak to just at least the investigator, then we could do that route as well.
So what would be the minimum evidence, or kind of like the minimum, I guess, facts you would need necessary to have HUD start an investigation? Just based on your experience, what have you seen that's likely to have triggered an investigation versus them declining to move forward with that?
What I've seen for them is basically investigators at HUD, they're wanting just to see, well, when did this happen? When did the actual property was notified, and what actions did they take? They want to see if there's anything that the victim has, whether it's an email or a photo or a voicemail that contribute to the alleged complaint. They want to see that type of documentation. If you have like police reports, that would be great. Like if you had to, when you went to the police or you filed it, that would be good as well. Those are generally the items that they're going to look for, is like, well, did they tell anybody else? Did anyone witness it? Or did you, is there anyone else that had that same experience as that person did?
What is the minimum evidence necessary to successfully bring a claim against the landlord? So we went to HUD, and this is probably a Kelly question, and now I want to come after the landlord because the landlord has sexually harassed me, tried to kick me out because I'm, a survivor of sexual assault. So what can I do? Like, what's the minimum that I need to try to go after the landlord and successfully win?
I think whether you were defending an eviction with your affirmative defense of fair housing violations, or if you were filing your own separate lawsuit, either way, I think it's just what those of us who went to law school learned. You know, you have to show by a preponderance of the evidence that this happened. And so it's very similar to what Giovanni was talking about. It's going to be the testimony of the survivor, any kind of paper trail that you have. You know, I would encourage anyone to save all their text messages, their emails, take pictures, their rent receipts, you know, anything they have. Sometimes it's hard, you want to just get rid of that stuff. But if that's something you're considering using to protect yourself in an eviction or to file a lawsuit, you want to hang on to it. I would also add just real quickly that there's a statute of limitations for HUD complaints of 1 year, and a lawsuit is going to be typically 2 years or 4 years for a breach of contract. So it makes a lot of sense to start with the HUD complaint for that reason, because after a year has gone by from when the discrimination happened, you can't file a HUD complaint anymore.
So what will happen if the landlord tries to retaliate? Because if I file the HUD complaint, because like you said, it's a 2-year or 4-year statute of limitation. So I'm going through these things and the landlord finds out that I filed a HUD complaint against them, and then he starts retaliating. Then what can I do? Kelly, did you hear me?
Yes, I disappeared, but now I'm back.
That's okay.
It was a quick save.
I mean, it was. And you did it with a smile.
Where were we? Retaliation?
Retaliation. You know, landlords are mad and upset because you filed a HUD complaint against me. I'm getting you back, so I'm kicking you out now. I don't care. What recourse do I have in that? I mean, I filed my complaint, so it's like, what recourse do I have? Or is there?
The Texas Property Code says a landlord cannot retaliate against a tenant who exercised their rights as a tenant in the last 6 months if the tenant is current on the rent. So if the landlord tried to evict you, you would have that defense. And then Giovanni can speak to filing a second complaint based on retaliation.
Yes, so we can file complaints based on retaliation.
Do you get a lot of retaliation complaints?
Oh, yes, we do.
Really? So what does that look like? So are they just trying to evict them out of the home, or they're not refusing to do repairs, cutting water off? Like, what does that look like?
Actually, all of the above. It's sad. I mean, I'm laughing, but it's not funny. But it's unfortunately it's all of the above. We have seen people getting threatened with lease violations that never happened or occurred. The tenant says that, you know, that did not transpire, and they have evidence that it didn't transpire because they were like out of town, so it couldn't possibly have been them on that lease violation. So like he said, they'll get their electricity turned off, or it's like, oh, well, and the landlord they know good and well that the tenant was still there, but they still turn the electricity off. They were still current on paying their bills, but they'll turn the electricity off. So yes, they do a lot of those things in the retaliation.
So go ahead, Brittany.
I was just going to say, I want to go back. Giovanni, you had mentioned before that one of the many hats that you wear in your role is that you are in charge of recruiting and training volunteers for the Fair Housing Testing Program. Can you touch on that a little bit? Because I think what that entails is fairly unusual in the realm of law. It's not something that you see in a lot of other areas of law, and it's something that people may not realize goes on behind the scenes.
Sure. Without going into too much detail, we're very, very proud of our Fair Housing Testing Program. What that is where it's a very valuable tool that we use to measure the quantity and the quality of information that is being given by the landlord or home, even the realtor or whomever that you're doing the home transaction through. I recruit testers throughout the Austin area. They're volunteers. And what they do is they go undercover as if they were purchasing or a home, or if they were wanting to rent at that property. And I always send them in groups of 2, usually on the same day, but like an hour to 30 minutes apart, in hopes that they're speaking to the same person, so the information is consistent. Basically, we're not trying to set them up in any method. We're not trying to set them up. We just want to measure the quality and the quantity of the information that is given to each tenant, regardless of the 7 protected classes under the Fair Housing Act.
So will you send the people you send, I'm guessing that maybe one person might be white or one person might be black, or do they go together?
Right, exactly. If we were testing for like race, one would be black or white. If we were testing for familial status, I would send I would have a tester call that had children, and then another tester would call that didn't have children.
How do you determine the property? Do you randomly select the property, or is it like all the property in Austin?
We randomly select the properties unless we get, we do random just out of the pot will select properties, or HUD will say that they have a complaint that they would like us to test. The main one, of course, is that because we're using it as a fair housing tool, is from the tenants. They will call. And if that housing, whomever that person that calls, when they get the counselor will say, hey, I think this will be a good thing to be tested. And they'll get that to me, and then I will test that for the counselor. And then if there's something there, which we hope there's not, then we proceed with that counselor will proceed with a complaint. But again, we're not, it's the testing program has been very, very supported through the Supreme Court because the information is very true and correct. I mean, we are not setting anyone up. It's calculated, it's structured. We are just sending testers to see if they're being told the exact same thing as the next person.
Do they ever find out they're being tested? Have you ever had somebody like a landlord find out?
Let's see. Since 2015, I've had only one person that was asked, and it was I don't know if it was like her first test time doing a sales test, but she said, she reported back to me that she's like, the guy asked me if I was a tester. I didn't know what to do, so I just left. And I was like, oh no, you just left. So yeah, it happened one time under my watch, but it's pretty good for just one time.
Right, that is good, and that's a good program. I wonder if they have it in Harris County.
I'm sorry?
I said, I wonder if they have it here in Harris County.
Yeah, I think they do. I do, because I think I've had one of my testers move to that area, and she wanted to find out where the tenants council was there. So I'm pretty sure that they have a program similar to that.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool. That's a good program. That is a real good program.
Yeah. Yeah, we use that a lot to help the tenants, even for the domestic violence or like sexual indifference. And other times that we do testing, it's like we do random testings. Like we've done random testings per our each contract year had requests that we select different areas that we could test, come up with different ideas. Like one year we did testing on like the source of income with the vouchers.
Mhm.
One year we did, last year actually, we did transgender testing. Before that year, we did domestic violence testing. So we do random projects each contract year to support our complaints that we receive from the community and according to the guidelines that HUD wants us to test.
Cool. That's very interesting. That's
Yeah,
very informative. I like that.
yeah, yeah. But I'm always looking for testers. So this,
Right.
no,
Be like, what's the requirements to be a volunteer?
you gotta get trained first.
Like that's a really good program. That's a really good program. So how does fair housing interact with or differ from other laws designed to protect tenants from sexual violence like VAWA? Kelly, that goes to you.
Oh no, it looks like she froze.
She's coming back.
You're quick.
still
I'm
here.
impressed.
No.
I'm so sorry. I've never had this happen before in the entire pandemic, but I guess it was time. Yes, I think Giovanni and I had said that I would take this question about VAWA, right?
Yeah.
The VAWA question.
Okay. All right, good. So the Violence Against Women Act housing protections apply to landlords who get federal money. So they don't apply to all landlords. They don't apply to private landlords who don't get any federal money. There's a long list of different types of HUD funding that it applies to. And I think we're putting it in the chat, the National Housing Law Project guide about VAWA protections, and that will tell you probably more than you wanted to know. But basically that law protects you if you're a victim of dating violence, family violence, sexual assault, or stalking, or you're a household member of the victim. And it protects you from being denied housing or evicted from housing because you are a victim. So you could still be denied housing or evicted for something totally unrelated to your status as a victim. But if you cannot be evicted or denied housing because of your status. For example, if someone is arrested, but really the other person is arrested and then goes on to get a protective order against them and a conviction for family violence, you, the person who were merely arrested at the scene, but you're truly the victim, the survivor of violence, you shouldn't be evicted for that incident, just as one example.
Mhm.
And then if they are evicted or being discriminated against, then they can just like file a complaint through HUD.
Yes, and that's one of your options, because I think your landlord has not only violated VAWA, but they've
Right.
also violated the fair housing laws,
Okay.
because what they're doing has a disparate impact on women, because women are more likely to be the victims of violence, and that's sex discrimination. If you have a client who's male, there still may be a fair housing argument to be made there, but we'd have to look into that a little bit more. The female client, absolutely.
So if someone else witnesses sexual violence against a tenant, what can they do to get protection? So if Brittany, don't be mad at me. So if I see Brittany being, harmed in any way, like sexually, domestically, or whatever, and it affects me, and now I'm no longer scared because I created, I have this fear that it may happen to me, because it could have just been a random stranger off the street. Me and Brittany are, neighbors in an apartment complex, and I see this happening and the guy sees me or whatever. So is there any protection that I can have, like if I want to break my lease because I'm scared, or if, something, like what can be done for the third party? Is there any third party protection?
That's a really good question. I don't think that just right off the bat there are third party protections, but there might be some things you can do, because, for example, if your lease talks about any kind of security measures that the landlord provides but they're not providing them, like good lighting in the parking lot,
Mhm.
that's something you could complain about. But in the fair housing context, like Giovanni was saying, someone else can file a complaint based on what they've observed, as I understand what you were saying, Giovanni.
Yes.
So,
And
oh, go
to-
ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and you probably actually go ahead because you may answer my question. Because it's like, even though because the question originally was like, if I want to do it on behalf of a friend, but now if it's a third party who witnessed it, and now they're scared, and I file a complaint, I guess, is there like protection that way? But no, Giovanni, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fair housing act, it's kind of like tricky there, and of what we can and can't do on our level. But for instance, like if you the third party, it's upsetting you that much, again, I would definitely, if you have any underlying conditions that is
Mhm.
covered by the protected classes, then yes, I would go that angle and try to like get out of your lease with a reasonable accommodation of that sort. But we just have to make sure that it falls under what is protected under the Fair Housing Act. We have to make the nexus from the act to one of the protected classes. So I would think that, like for instance, if you had you already had PTSD from another incident, and this being a witness to this incident has aggravated your PTSD and caused you turmoil and anxiety, increased like your medications or what have you, it's drastically affected your mental state, then yes, we could definitely, help the agency. We could definitely help you with a reasonable accommodation to get out of the lease in the apartment. We could also connect you like with other resources in our agency or out of our agency to help you get through the process of being a witness to this. You might be able to even exercise your rights under the Texas property codes as far as like you don't feeling safe, you no longer feel safe under your lease contract, and that's affecting you.
Have y'all seen have you had any third party complaints? And Kelly, have you had any third party cases?
I have had clients who, like Giovanni was saying, wanted to move early because the entire situation they were living in was too stressful for them because of the separate diagnosis. So they were asking to leave early based on disability as a protected class, and maybe sometimes also sex is the protected class as well. And I think also it could become a hostile environment for the witness as well. If this is something that just goes on out in the open, whatever it is that the landlord is doing, it may violate more than one person's rights and be a form of sex discrimination against more than one person, because it's creating a hostile environment, even when it's not directed at you personally.
Cool.
So I think usually at this point it's where we kind of ask our guests that if somebody has experienced a sexual assault or is experiencing sexual harassment, what should they do, or what do you recommend they do? But I think what both of y'all have kind of repeated on a regular basis and made really clear that is first reach out to y'all to determine whether or not they have a viable claim, because again, it can be really complicated. So where do you think that somebody should start? Because we've also talked about filing the HUD complaint. So where do you think the best place somebody should start would be?
Yeah, I think if you are concerned about eviction, definitely call your local legal aid. I think my legal aid colleagues in other parts of the state would agree, because that's when you want legal advice, because that's a case that's going to either go to court or is already there.
And Giovanni, where do you think that people should start when they've had some sort of an experience like this, but they're not currently facing an eviction?
I think they should definitely start with their closest person that they trust, and and let them know what's going on. Don't keep this assault or harassment to yourself. It needs to be addressed so it won't happen to them again or anyone else. So they need to tell someone, whether it's a family member, a caseworker, the police. They need to tell someone that they trust that can offer them some type of resolution so that it won't happen to them again. In order to get the ball rolling for someone to step in and to help them.
I think that's a really important point.
Right.
One more thing I want to touch on, Kelly, you did want to share a resource about some other relief or other legal recourses that people might have available to them under Texas law. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure, I think we're putting that in the chat. Also, the website from Texas Law Help, which by the way is a good general resource for legal information because this is so state specific. You don't want to get on there and find something from a different state that doesn't apply in Texas. So you can end your lease early in Texas because of family violence, dating violence, sexual assault, or stalking. And that's different from VAWA that I talked about earlier, because there's a state law that applies to all landlords. And the key though is you have to do it correctly. So you can't just leave and expect to not be held liable for the rest of your lease. You have to provide the correct documentation at the correct time before you leave. And that's explained in more detail on the website. But also, even more importantly, you can leave for your safety. This is all paperwork. This is about paperwork to end your lease officially so that you're not on the hook for more rent after you had to move because of violence. So I just want to make that clear. I've told people that before. You don't have to stay if it's not safe, but this is about setting it up, hopefully, so that you can avoid having a lot of money put on your credit. It's also a state law that you have the right to call emergency assistance, and you should not be getting an eviction notice because a lot of police calls have been made to your place, or there's a lot of fighting, because I've seen those, and that's a violation of the Texas Property Code as well.
Is there a time frame from the incident for them to file or to try to get out the lease? Like, do I have like 6 months or a year, or is it more closer to like as soon as it happens? Or what is the better practice?
Well, when it comes to sexual assault, if it occurred at the property in the last 6 months, you can give written 30 days notice to end your lease. So the fastest you can end it is 30 days with the right documentation that's explained in the law, the documentation of the assault. If it's family violence, then it doesn't have to be at the property, but in the last 6 months, but you would give 30 days notice with the documentation if the person who committed the violence is not a household member. If they are a household member, you don't have to give 30 days notice. So once again, you got to get on the website and look at all these things, but basically we're talking approximately 30 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brittany, have anything else?
No, ma'am, I think that covered everything.
Well, thank you, ladies, for being a guest. Let everybody know how they can reach you. Kelly, if Charla in the Charla area, how can they contact Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid if they're needing legal assistance?
You can check out our website, trla.org, and that has our hotline number, which if you want to apply for services, you call there. And the website has a lot of general information. We keep it very up to date with all the latest pandemic news. So I would recommend the website.
And what areas do Charla cover?
That's on the website too. We're basically El Paso to Austin to Corpus down to the border.
Okay. And then Giovanni, where can they contact Austin Tenants Council if anybody's needing assistance?
Oh, yes, we have a website as well. It's www.housing-rights.org. Again, that's housing-rights.org, or they can call us. We are still, although we're not in the office, we're still fully operational, working remotely, and they can call us at 512-474-1961. and speak with one of our housing advocates on the counseling line. Yes, those are the best ways to reach us or to file a complaint.
And do y'all just only do the Austin area, or like is Georgetown and those other areas included as well?
Yes, we do Travis County, Williamson County, Hayes. We even go as far up as Temple,
Okay.
Killeen. Yeah, and then we do have the outskirts so too as well. We just have to be careful because there are other tenant council agencies. Like there's one in Houston, and then there's one in San Antonio. So we don't want to. So even if they do contact us, we will be more than happy to direct them to the closest tenants council for assistance.
Kind of like how we do.
Right. And as always, if you need legal assistance in the Harris County and our other surrounding areas or other areas, you can contact us in 1-800-733-8394, or you can go to our website at www.lonestarlegal.org. Do not sit in silence. I say that after every show. If you know somebody, please reach out, have them. Well, again, let me rephrase. If you know somebody, listen, because the first thing you have to do, listen and do not judge. And then when they're ready to reach out, be there for them. And if you are suffering, do not suffering in silence. There are plenty of resources without the great state of Texas that can be able to assist and help. So please reach out. We're here. So
Thank you, ladies, for joining us today. It was a wonderful discussion.
Thank you.
You.
Thank you.